Skill 12, Properties of Parallel Lines. Example 1, we want to identify supplementary angles. So, the measure of angle 3 is 55 degrees. Which angles are supplementary to angle 3? And for each one of these, tell how you know that they are supplementary to 3. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to look at, supplementary to 3, is right here, because that's a straight angle right there. So angle 3 and angle 4 are supplementary by the linear pair postulate, because 3 and 4 form a linear pair. Okay, now another one that we could say is 3 and 8 are supplementary. So that would be 3 and 8 are supplementary. So we would say angle 3 and angle 8 are supplementary by the same side interior angle postulate, because those two angles are supplementary by the postulate. Next one we have is, we see that angle 8 and angle 6 are vertical angles, and by our definition of vertical angles, or our theorem of vertical angles, we know that those two vertical angles have congruent angle measures. So we can say that angle 3 and angle 6 are supplementary by the vertical angles theorem, because we already know that 3 and 8 are supplementary by the same side interior angle postulate. So we had to string two ideas together for that one. And finally, angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary, and this reasoning could also be by the vertical angles theorem, or it could be by the linear pair postulate. Either one of those ideas would work on this one. So angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary by the linear pair postulate or the vertical angles theorem. For this next example, we want to prove an angle relationship. So given that A is parallel to B, prove that angle 1 and angle 8 are supplementary angles. Okay, so the first thing for all proofs, we're going to start with what we are given. So we say A is parallel to B by the given. Next, we have to see different things that we can do. Well, the first thing that I'm going to look at is 1 and any other number that I know, because 1 is in my final answer, so I want to work it in somehow. So 1 and 5 are corresponding angles. We have a theorem that says we can do something with that. Corresponding angles are congruent, is what our theorem says. So that's what I'm going to say next. So we write angle 1 is congruent to angle 5 by the corresponding angles. Next, I know that I can change congruence into measures of angles. That might help me, so I'm going to do that next. So the measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 5, and this is by definition of congruent angles. Alright, so now that I have the measures of angle 5 and 1 in there, I can maybe look at linear pairs or supplementary ideas. So what I'm going to look at next is, I see that angle 5 and angle 8 are on that, form a linear pair there. So because they form a linear pair, I can say they are supplementary. So that's going to be my next step. So we state that angle 5 and angle 8 are supplementary by the linear pair postulate. Okay, step 5. Now I should be able to relate angle measures to a certain number by supplementary. Supplementary means adding up to get 180, so I should be able to work that in next. Since 5 and 8 are supplementary, then if I add those two angle measures together, I get 180 degrees. So the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 8 equals 180 degrees by definition of supplementary angles. The next step is I look at things that I know. So I'm going to kind of bounce back to other information that I already have stated. I have stated that measure of angle 1 is the same as measure of angle 5. Well, if that's the case, then I can take this measure of angle 1 and put it in for the measure of angle 5. So that's going to be my next step. So we can state the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 8 equals 180 degrees, and that is by algebraic substitution, because I just dropped in a different thing for a certain number or variable. So my last step, hopefully I can get to what I want to know, which is to say that angle 1 and angle 8 are supplementary. And I can make that jump because 1 plus 8 is giving me 180 degrees. So I can make that final jump. So we say angle 1 and angle 8 are supplementary by definition of supplementary angles. Example 3, we're going to be finding measures of angles. What are the measures of angle 3 and angle 4, and state which theorem or postulate is going to justify that answer. Okay, so the first thing we need to note is P and Q are parallel to each other, and L and M are parallel to each other. If you don't know these things are parallel, then you can't make conclusions. So the first thing I'm looking at is angle 3. Okay, so I'm going to look at angle 3 and see how I can compare that to other things. Well, the first thing I'm going to look at is, since P and Q are parallel, I can look at the fact that we have alternate interior angles with 3 and this 105 degrees here. Those are alternate interior angles based on P and Q, with our transversal being the M. So, alternate interior angles theorem states that those two angles would be congruent to each other. So that means that angle 3 is equal to 105 degrees because of the congruence. Now the reasoning for this would be the alternate interior angles theorem. Alright, now we're going to look at the other one, which is angle 4. So angle 4 is right here. This time we could look at lines L and M being parallel, and then the transversal being the Q here. Okay, so if that's the case, then we would know that 4 and 105, angle 4 and 105, would add up to 180 degrees. So that's by the same side interior angles postulate. So if I do a little algebra here and subtract off the 105, then what I get is my angle 4 is 75 degrees. And again, this is by the same side interior angle postulate. So that's how you would find the measure of angle 4. Or that's one way you could find the measure of angle 4. For this next one, we want to prove, given A is parallel to B, angle 1 is 40, angle 2 is y, and angle 3 is 80, we want to prove that y equals 60. Okay, so I'm going to start with my given. So I have A is parallel to B, angle 1 equals 40, angle 2 equals y, and angle 3 equals 80 by our given. So next I'm going to see what I can do by figuring out what things should be. Well, I know based on same side interior angle, if we have two parallel lines right here with A and B, then the interior angles right here and right here are going to add up to be supplementary, so are going to add up to be 180 degrees. So that's what I'm going to say, is I'm going to say that these angles here are going to sum to 180 degrees. So that implies that angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3 is equal to 180 degrees by the same side interior angle postulate. Okay, the next thing is now I can substitute in, because now I have everything in the form of an equation. So I'm going to substitute in for angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3. So I'm just going to put everything in where they belong and then see what happens from there. So 40 plus y plus 80 equals 180 by algebraic substitution. So the next step is to combine my like terms. My 40 and 80 added together is 120, equal to 180 when you add it to y. So step 4, y plus 120 equals 180. For the reasoning would be algebra by combining the like terms. And the final step is to solve for the y and get the 120 over with 180. So that would be y equals 60, and we subtracted the 120 over, so our reasoning is subtraction property of algebra. And that's your final proof. So those are your notes over Skill 12, Properties of Parallel Lines. Summarize your notes, make sure that it all makes sense to you, and then do some practice problems, and then you should be ready for your quiz.